Hello everyone, welcome back to Valley of the Mist Block of the Month. I'm Adriane Ritter.
And I'm Shelley McNeely.
And this is our June 2026 Block of the Month. And this month we are making a peony. And I will say, this is going to be kind of improvisational, so really put your creative hat on. And it's not hard, but it is a little complicated to explain. So we are going to do the first thing, the easy thing, talk about fabric, and then the first step, and then we'll move on.
Okay.
All right, so Shelley, what do we need?
Okay, so this year our focus fabric, which you will need if you're going to turn your block in for the drawing at the guild meeting. And this thing is called, from Banyan Batiks, it's called Kaleidoscope Line. If you are not making it for turning it in, your fabric choices are up to you. And the only thing that does matter is the focus fabric, and you can use it anywhere in the block. All the other pieces can be whatever color fabric you want.
Right, and if you're doing it for the guild and you use it in a minimal space, then a fat quarter is enough to make 2 of each of the blocks.
Okay, so here we go with what the fabric we need.
And I'll warn you right now, I'm going to interject a little bit as she talks, because there's some weird
iffy things.
There's some weird explanations here at the beginning.
Okay. So the background, we're going to need 2 pieces that are 3.5 by 4.5, and 2 pieces that are 2 by 3 3/4.
And those are the only ones we want you to cut at the beginning.
Because of the background.
Of the background.
Yes.
Because she's going to so tell her the others.
Okay. So then when there's 2 pieces that are 2.5 by 8.5. And
go here and here.
And then 2 4-inch.
These ones, yeah.
2 4-inch squares. That's all we need from the.
No, and the top piece. There's a long one. Yeah, 1.5 by 12.5.
I missed that one? Oh, yeah, way up at the top. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I'm going to stop right there and say, when you make your flower part of the block, you're going for an approximate size. And if it gets bigger or smaller, a little bit, not a lot, that's fine. But these pieces maybe will need to be a slightly different size. So if you're like this, like the size that we tell you to aim for, I think is about 9.5.
I thought it was 8.
Oh, 8.5. Okay, 8.5. Well, we'll see. We'll get to it. But mine went a little bigger. Like I think it looks a little bigger than Shelley's. So I needed a little less at the top and a little less at the sides. So I'm just telling you, wait to cut those because we'll figure that out. And then at one point you're going to put these little corner pieces on. And to be honest, I was able to use the little corner pieces from my leaves on 2 of the corners because my corners were so little at the bottom.
Oh yeah.
So some of them you may not even cut, and some of them you might just have little scrap pieces that are going to work. So just hold off on cutting those babies.
Okay, now for the flower, we have what we're calling flower 1 through 4. So flower 1, we're going to start with a strip of fabric that's 1 to 1.5 inches wide by 22 inches long, and this is approximate length. And flower 2 would be the same, a strip that's 1 to 1.5 inches by 22. And then flower 3 is a strip that's 1 to 1.5 by a width of fabric. And then flower 4 is 1 5-sided piece of fabric, approximately 2 inches in diameter, which is for the center.
So the 5-sided is, it actually could be a 3-sided. We're not that picky on the center. 3-sided, as you sew the sides on, tends to get really little. So that's why I think a 5-sided works better. These are some examples. I'm going to use one of these. I haven't decided. I will tell you, the focus fabric works really wonderful for the centerpiece, but I just had some yellow scrap, so I went with that instead. We're going to, when we do that part, you're going to be sewing these strips around the center, kind of in a log cabin kind of fashion of rings around it. But you want your fabric 1 is the one closest to the center. Fabric 4 is your centerpiece. But then fabric 1 is closest to the center. And the ones inside, I would recommend to make those strips narrower than the outer ones. Because otherwise you end up just cutting away a lot of the fabric. and I've done several trials of this flower, and it just seems to work better that way. So, and those amounts of length are kind of approximate. It depends. If obviously if they're wider, you need less. Well, it's
Depends on how much you cut away.
Yeah, it depends on how much you cut away, and it depends on
Yeah.
how and while we say use 3 colors, you can use 7 colors. You know,
I used 4.
You can use as many as you want
Yeah.
to make it the look you want. This is really your chance to express yourself, you know, how you want this flower to look. So that said, we're going to start with the leaf.
Okay, so let me tell you what you need for leaves.
Okay.
For the leaves, you need 2 2-inch squares, and then for the stem, you need 1 piece that's 1.5 by 3.5.
Okay, so for the leaves and stem part, we actually can make, oh, I should just bring this whole board up here after I made a jumbly mess. But so for the leaves, we're going to do a flippy corner on these white pieces that are here. So you're going to place this on here. So draw a diagonal line on the piece of leaf fabric. I would use something like yellow or something so you can see it. And then you're gonna I'm trying to look at it and see how I did it. I think
it depends on what side of the stem
so
you're on.
you're gonna sew here, and you're gonna fold the stem up like this if it's on this side. Okay, and the other side you're gonna do the opposite. And then once that's done, we'll come back and we'll talk about the finishing of the leaf section. Okay, so we have sewn our stitch and flip corners, or we call them flippy corners. We'll never remember it again. I had to look it up, but I won't remember it. Anyway, so we have those on there. These leaf section pieces, I originally had you cut that background piece 2 by 3 3/4. And I gave you a little 1/4 inch extra on the length just in case you had trouble with your flippy corner. It really only needs to be 3.5 inches long, but I would recommend that you trim off any extra that's hanging over from the leaf if there is. And then we're going to sew this from left to right across to finish this bottom section. But because these could be long, make sure you're lining everything up at the top end. All right.
Okay.
All right, our leaf and stem section is finished. Now we're going to work on the main part of the flower. And so we're just going to go through the first round right now. And so you're going to, like I said, have a centerpiece. Shelly has one with her focus fabric. I've got 2. I still haven't decided which one I'm going to use. And I'm gonna start with this, and you know, I would suggest you look at pictures of peonies, see what you think they look like. Mine, the kind of goal I'm going for is that mine's like a purple one, and the center is just lighter, and the darker is maybe the shadow on the outside. But they really can go light to dark, dark to light, mix it up however you want. It's really up to you. I think that these flowers are so fun to make because it's so creative. So I have this piece of, I got it from trimming an end of a piece of yardage that wasn't even. And so it's really kind of, I mean, I took a little extra off so I'd have some fabric there, but it was uneven on the end, and now I have an even piece of fabric and I have this to use. You're going to start by putting, say I'm going to use this piece. You're going to start with an end of your fabric, and actually I'm probably going to cut this in the middle because I like this little narrow part better. So you're going to, line up your fabric. Make sure when you are, like this is how I'm going to do it. If I fold it out, that it's covering this edge. And because we are having some weird angles, always double check, because if you've done paper piecing or anything like that, you know You think you've got it right, and then you fold it out, and nope, the angle went the other way, and I've got to take it off and redo it. And I don't want you to have to do that. So always double check when you fold it out that you're covering that line. And you're gonna sew on, and we're gonna go around the block. The one thing I would caution is that most likely on a 5-sided piece, one of the sides is going to be short. Don't start with that side. End with that side. Because if you start with the short side, you kind of lose it. It's hard to explain why, but it'll just end up getting trimmed away, and you'll end up back at a 4-sided piece. And we're trying to make, so even though, you know, this is not round, it gives the illusion of a round because it's not square or rectangular, and the 5-sided helps do that. So we're going to go away, we're going to go back to our sewing machines, and we're going to sew on our first round of fabric. And
you want to explain kind of what they do?
Yeah, okay. So as I sew on a piece, I'm going to sew on this piece like I said here, and when it's done, I'm going to trim. I've made sure it sticks out the one end. And you can go clockwise or counterclockwise, whichever way you want, but be consistent as you go around in the round. You could probably change between rounds, but I think it looks better if you keep going the same direction. So I'm going to sew this on, and then when I'm done, I'm going to fold it out, and I'm going to trim the edge even with the next edge. So say I'm going clockwise. That would be going clockwise, right, if I did that?
Yes.
Okay. It's possible backwards, it's kind of clockwise. Either way. So I've got that one on, and now I'm going to sew, I'll start with the other end. So now I'm going to sew an edge on here. And this is obviously extended out. So it's more like that. And I'm going to sew the edge onto this side. I'm going to line it up and sew the edge here. Fold it out, make sure it fits. And I keep trimming to that next edge that I'm going to sew on to until I get to the last edge. And when you get to the last edge, you've got to look at whether there was any that kind of came out from your first edge that got in the way. And if there is, just trim that last edge, make it nice and even, make it a straight edge again. And make sure that when you're adding your pieces, that none of your fabric is so wide that it kind of engulfs the whole edge. And that really is mostly a problem in this first round. But we'll talk about that a little bit when we come back.
I found that sometimes, oh, this looks too wide here. You could still trim an edge you already used if you didn't want it to be that.
Right. If you think it looks like it's more, trim that off. But a lot of the trimming to shape the flower that we're going to do, we'll do after we put on the whole round. Right. But she's right. If I started with these fat parts, they're really too fat in this beginning, and I maybe would cut them down, and like this could almost be cut. You could almost cut off a ½ an inch of this, and you'd be in a much better shape for it.
Don't go too narrow, or you won't end up with anything because of your seams.
Yeah.
So just be careful. Don't go less than 3/4 for sure.
Because then you're only adding a 1/4 of an inch to the side.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say an inch is a good size for this first round. All right, we'll come back with our first round put on. Well, we decided to come back a little bit before we finish the first round, just in case it was confusing. So I have sewn on 4 of my 5 sides. And as you can see, this side's kind of pointy. I'm not worried about that right now. This side is sticking off. I'm not worrying about that. Here I need to cut this edge. But one of the things I wanted to point out, when you're trimming, make sure that you always press out your fabric and then trim to match that edge, because if I had trimmed it while it was down here, it wouldn't fill that edge.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to trim that real quick.
We found that pressing
out
away from where you're going to be sewing next, that's to that side that you haven't sewn yet. Is the best way or the easiest way to make it work.
Right. And so what have you done on yours so far, Shelley?
Well, essentially the same. I've started down here and come around here. Now, I in theory have this. That was my short edge. It looks short, but it's not really short, because once I cut this off, I have a longer piece where I can finish that edge.
Okay, so it's kind of hard to tell because my my background is yellow. I'll show it against this white right here. But this is my last edge. And before I do my last edge, like I said, I need to trim and make that straight.
Right.
So let me do that. The other thing I want to mention is that if you sew on an edge, and even though you carefully checked it and it was going to flip out and be the right size, and you flip it out and it's not, you can always trim that back so it works. You don't have to unsew. I mean,
no.
Unless it's way off. Okay, so now this would be my final edge, and another thing to keep in mind that when you're sewing these strips on, it's easier to see where to start and stop sewing if you have your strip on the bottom and your piece that you're adding it to on top, because then I can see where everything is. But it does sometimes mean that I have to trim from an edge that I might not have needed to yet, but you can turn it around. I'm not sure which way I need it this way, but your fabric can go this way or it can go this way.
Right. Luckily with us, we're doing batik, so it can go lots of ways.
Oh, it can even go upside down.
Yeah.
And so while this is a weird, it doesn't have it's not a straight edge, it's kind of curved, it doesn't matter because I just can turn it around. So now I'm going to sew on this last edge and then be done. And Shelly's got, what, two more? One more?
One more. I got trim this edge just like she did. And then
it looks like there's going to be nothing there, but there will be an edge. You want to trim it real quick or not? You want me to trim it?
Sure.
So when she trims that, even though it looks right now like there's hardly any edge there, it's actually going to be about
3 inches.
A 2.5, 3 inch edge.
Yeah.
So
there we go. See, now I have an edge. And I can sew this piece on there.
Whereas if she had started with that little edge, it really would have kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
Because it gets taken away by how you trim it. Okay, so we're going to come back with that last edge on, and then we'll talk about the shaping before the next round. Okay? All right, our center section is done. And like I was just mentioning to Shelly, mine is roughly, I've only gone up about 1 inch. Mine's only about 3 inches square, roughly. And we are aiming for about 8.5. So the next thing we need to do, obviously this doesn't look right. I've got an edge here I need to trim. I have this pointy thing I need to take off. And there's a couple of ways to go about this. But I just I put it down in front of me. I look at it and I'm like, what don't I like? What doesn't look flower-like to me? And so I trim off like this edge where it's sticking off. I've got to take that off. So let me just do that. Now, one thing to be conscious of when you're trimming is think of how many new sides you're adding when you trim. And it's possible to do the trimming where you don't add an extra side. Like this one right here, where I have this point that I don't like. If I do a long trim there, I can trim that point off and still have just that same one side. Mm-hmm. But maybe that's blockier than I want. And it doesn't hurt to add sides. It's just the more sides you add, the more steps around it. And each time you do the round, you can add or take away sides depending on how you trim it. Mm-hmm. And in this block, it's kind of hard to see, but right here, I have this little teeny tiny triangle that's there because of the way I trimmed it. And actually my second round on this one, I kind of mix two colors. Each round doesn't have to be all one color. They can be a mixture. You can do your color one can come back later on and be an accent color later on, however you want. So Shelly's going to talk about hers while I kind of trim up this a little bit to see how I want it to look for the next round and take off that pointy corner.
Yeah, I have kind of the same issue, and I'm totally not sure what I'm going to do. But I'll talk about the one I made before a little bit. So I had 5 sides, still had 5 sides after the first round. Put on the next round. Now, I'm not sure how far we're going to get here. But in that round, because it's bigger, I ended up with 9 sides to make it look more round.
But it looks beautiful. It
Once
looks,
you get, because I was trying to aim for it round, but it's already too small, I thought, to go for that. So it's kind of hard.
What do you mean? What's too small?
What the piece we're working on right now.
Oh, to go for that many sides.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because otherwise they're going to be really little. And I think, if I remember correctly, when I did trim this one, the first round, which maybe is hard to see, I think I went for 6, but by the end of it, I still ended up with 5 because one of them disappeared.
Right.
So, I kind of have the same issue as Adriane on this one. I have a pointy, and I'm not really sure exactly where I'm going to start to.
I mean, you're probably going to trim down this.
Yes, yes.
And obviously these little pieces are going to come
to
off.
make it,
yeah,
to get this away and not have a really long side, I haven't figured out exactly what I'm going to do there, if anything,
right
at this point.
So I'm kind of happy with how mine looks right now.
Well, yours looks good, yeah.
And I ended up adding 1 side, so I have 6 sides at this point. And I'm going to once again try to look at it and take my smallest side and make sure that's the one I'm adding fabric to last. And obviously, like we said, you can go clockwise or counterclockwise. I really don't think it shows if you change between rounds. What I'm mulling over is whether I really like this fabric, and I have enough that I could probably do another round with it, because I actually even have a little more sitting at my sewing machine. And I might do one more round of this because I'm still so little. On this one, when I was making it, when I got to the outside, my favorite fabric was my outer fabric, and it was already getting really big. And I'm like,
yeah,
oh, I want to use a lot of this fabric, but I really didn't have the space. So think about that. Don't save your favorite fabric for last and then not have room to use it.
Right.
But I know that's not much good advice, but it is something to think about. So now we're going to go and put on the next round, and you'll start to see maybe a little more of what we mean, and we'll come back and we'll show our trimming choices to round out the block. Okay, so we have our round 2 on. And let me show you. This is a 5.5-inch square up ruler, and it's not full, but it's a pretty good, close to 5.5-inch filling that up.
Mine is
Shelly's needs to be trimmed a lot. Hers is still small, but she's got some wider strips that she's going to put on. So, all right, I'm going to cut to explaining a little bit of the end to explain the goal as you go around. So at this point, we figure we have like 2 more rounds. If you used bigger fabric to start with, you might only have 1 more round, because your goal is to get approximately 8.5. And when we get to that point, the easiest way to finish this block is to have 8 sides. And the main thing, what I'm going to tell you, you want 2 sides. You're going to look at your block and say, do I have 2 sides that are pretty much opposite each other, and make a top and a bottom? And from there, I'm going to look at maybe trimming to get some corners and 2 other sides to the block. So we're going to build out to there, and we're going to come back and talk about this. But if you're worried about adding sides, keep in mind that 8 is kind of the goal number of sides for
8 inches.
8.5.
Oh, 8 sides.
8 sides. I gotcha. 8 sides.
4 long and 4 short? Is that what it is?
No, it really doesn't matter.
Oh, okay.
Generally the ones in the corners end up being a little smaller, but like this one's fairly long. And on my other sample one, it was long. So I was going to do, Shelley's going to talk about hers a minute. She's got a lot of trimming to do.
I do.
I'm going to do a little bit of trimming here.
I think I gained a side somehow when I was doing this.
But that's okay.
It was, because I want to gain some sides. And I still want to get off this point. But
Which point?
Well, here.
Oh, that long point there.
I'm really going to try and do some trimming here to make this look more round. And I added a 1 1/4 inch round here. So that's why mine's smaller probably. And I'm not really sure, maybe 1.5 on my next round. We'll see.
And it's amazing
Yeah.
how much bigger these sides get as we go out.
Right.
So,
because I'm really trying to get 2 more rounds in for sure. Because I have 2 more fabrics I want to use. So we'll see how that all works out. Like I said, the last time I got a lot more sides added when I did trimming. But when you do your sides, again, you don't want them terribly short because otherwise you will lose them. But now that there's more length to this, it's easier to do some cutting off of points. Probably here and even up here, I'm going to try and cut that off.
So I'm sure you were watching Shelley talk, but I cut off 3 little pieces off of my block, and I've made it much rounder looking.
Yeah.
And I gained a side. I have 7 sides now.
Okay.
And so if I look at it, I could see that I could finish this with this being my bottom, this being my top. I have a couple of corners. I've got to get one more side in there somewhere. Or there's ways to add the background pieces that you don't have to have the sides. I'm just saying that's the easiest.
So how did you, now like how, if you're going to do this and top and bottom, like, do you measure this now and think what to do, or?
No, I just keep adding.
Okay.
I mean, like on this one, like I said, I ended up having to make these pieces very small because it got big. But remember, I told you the block, we're going for 8.5, but you're the artist. And if your flower looks a little bigger,
that's fine.
You could always take off a little stem at the bottom. You can have less filler at the top, definitely less filler on the sides. You know, that's roughly the size flower that we're going for. So we're going to go add the rest of our flower rounds and come back to talk about filling out the rest of the block with the background fabric.
Okay.
All right, we're getting close. I'm really liking the way my flower looks. I'm sure you can see mine's a lot bigger than Shelley's, but I'm okay with that. So this is a 9.5-inch square ruler. And if you were at 9.5, it would work. You would just have smaller sides. And oh, get out of my way, stem. So you can see I'm pretty big, but I've marked on here where I'm planning on cutting. So I, at this point, only have 6 sides. Instead of gaining any sides, I lost one. So I'm going to trim these sides back, and you have extra on the edges. If you're a little big, you can just make those sides smaller. So if I trim those back, I'm going to have, and I take these points off, it's going to give me back 2 sides. And one of the things that I told you to wait to cut were like 4-inch squares. And these squares, if a 4-inch square on the diagonal is 5.5 inches. So so now I have these 4-inch squares, and they're going to fit and fill out my corners. I'm going to take and fold one diagonally. And you'll see that when I have that, this will fit right here. It'll fit here. It'll fit, it'll fit all around on all of those. You may have something like Shelley has, and she might have some littler points.
Yeah.
And she might be able to have some scrap pieces that she can use to fill out those corners. So basically, we're going to do this final trim, get the look of our flower, kind of like you can see in here, add corners if we need 4 corners. If you only need 3, it might look a little blocky.
I cut mine to, if I have to, I'll cut it. So I need 4 corners.
Okay. And then you're going to measure, after you put in the corners, kind of make it a rectangle or a square, a good shape. And then you know what size pieces that you need to put on the top and the bottom. The original, if it was 8.5 when you were done, then you needed this top piece of background to be 1.5 inches by 12 and a half. but if you're not sure, cut it a little big. These side pieces, if you were at the 8.5, then you needed those to be 2.5 inches on each side. So if you're a little wider, take a little bit away. But so we're going to come back and we're going to have, do we want to come back with it just looking like a square, or do we want to come back with the finished block?
Should we put the corners on and then come back?
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that. We'll put the corners on.
See what size we have.
Yeah, see where we're at. Shelley, where are you planning on trimming?
Well, I'm going to cut this area off here. Okay, I already cut off the top and bottom, so I figured out what the top and bottom.
And hers are about 8.5 inches.
Yes, and then this.
I don't think you can see the line, but she's got a mark right here that she's going to cut.
If I cut there and here, I'll have 8.5.
You hold on the other one.
Right here. That will give me 8.5. You know, but we'll see it.
But then she's got this weird corner here,
so
she's going to. Sorry, I'm going right in your face. Yeah. You show. So she's going to trim that to get back those.
Yeah, and then I got to figure out what else.
I think there was something hanging off right here.
Yeah, there's some things here, but we'll have to see how this works out.
Okay, so we'll come back and we'll talk about the final background pieces that we're going to add. All right, we have them all trimmed. They're looking beautiful. I really had trouble trimming mine because I didn't want to cut off that fabric. So Shelley, is yours 8.5 inch square?
Not it's a slightly more than 8.5 width, but the height
is 8.5.
8.5, yeah.
Okay, so mine is 8.5 by 9.5.
Okay.
Because I didn't want to cut off all my purple.
Yeah.
So so originally what we told you needed to finish the block, and that's what we're going to do now. We're going to take our flower piece, add the side pieces. Mine is 9.5, not 8.5. And so originally I said the side pieces should be 2.5 by 8.5. So mine only need to be 2 inches wide because I can take a 1/2 inch off of each side. Shelley's is just slightly different, so she's going with the pieces that she had that were the 2.5 inch, and she'll trim at the end.
Right.
At the top, mine is 8.5 inch tall, so I need the 1.5 inch. That's what you need. So we'll add the sides, add the top and bottom, and come back, and we will have our finished block. All right, look at that, 4 maids all in a row.
I know.
Those flowers look beautiful. This is my favorite one so far.
I know. You might think this is hard, but I would just say persevere, and in the end it's going to be perfect.
It is. I mean, it's where you get to be the most creative, I think.
Yeah.
I just love it.
If you think you did something wrong or didn't turn out, just add another
row.
Yeah, add another row.
And you know what, actually I was telling Shelley that, because I think we've talked about how we use batiks. And she used a mixture of batiks this time, but mine were batiks. So I could flip my fabric to take advantage of that angle that you're cutting off and get the most use of my fabric. And one time I thought I had it placed right and I had it over enough, and I didn't. I was slightly off. So when I trimmed, I just trimmed it shorter. It's fine. You don't have to. We're not telling you any exact size of these, so don't unsew things. Trim it.
I would say you really don't have to until maybe the end if something's weird, but when you're doing the flower part, it's really hard to be wrong.
It is. And actually, one of the trickiest things is when you're putting on these triangles, which as you can see, they end up being pretty little. Watch how they fold out in relation to the other triangles. Because you could have it where it's not going to make a good square.
Yeah, I was being very careless because I thought, oh, these are so big for my corners. But even this was one of these corners that's maybe this one because it's really oblong. I barely made that.
Yeah, so watch the placement of those triangles.
Yeah.
But like mine was oversized, so I could trim back the triangles and still be good on my size. So so there's a lot of forgiving things about the trimming and how you piece it that makes it easier, even though it does make you express your creativity.
Do we want to mention how we think the?
Well, okay. So I think that the leaves look best when they're completely under the edge of a block. Otherwise, I have another sample one which is just with scrap fabrics, and they kind of look like a lollipop to me. But that is purely your choice. Shelley's, this one, just the tiniest bit of that edge doesn't quite go under, and so it looks fine. But I really do try to, I would say, try to pick your wider sides for the top and bottom so you can get that stem underneath.
Yeah, I almost thought this wasn't going to work, but when I sewed the seam, it was okay.
Yeah. All right, so we will see you back here next month.